Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Community Charging Rebates Program information session. We're still waiting for some people to join, so we're going to give it a couple of minutes. Apologies for the technical difficulties. So hang tight and we'll start in just a couple of minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for an information session today. Due to some technical difficulties, we're going to give people just one more minute to join, and we'll go ahead and get started at 12:03. So hang tight, get comfy, and get your questions ready. We'll start at 12:03.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I just saw a comment in the chat asking about if people can hear. So, are people able to hear me okay? I could just get some confirmation in the chat. That would be great. Perfect. Okay, that's good to know. So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Jenna Compton. I'm the key contact at the Oregon Department of Transportation for the Community Charging Rebate Program. Thank you for all of that confirmation in the chat, guys. I will be presenting details on the program today. Before I get into it, I would like to mention that we have a guest here that works for Fourth. ODOT has contracted with Fourth to help with outreach and technical assistance. I would like to begin by introducing Alexandra and then Stu.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra Everett, and I'm a program manager at Fourth, working on this wonderful rebate program with ODOT, and I'll be facilitating the Q&A session later in the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Alexandra. And then Stu, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Stu Green. I work also at Fourth. I'm a policy manager here. And prior to working at Fourth, I worked at the city of Ashland with Ashland Electric Utility, working on their public charging and other electrification programs.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Stu. After the CCR presentation, Stuart will go over his experience of having chargers installed. There will be a brief Q&A with questions that we have drafted and think would be helpful to a lot of the applicants. Then we will answer any questions that come into the chat about CCR after that. All right, let's begin. So, the purpose of the Community Charging Rebate Program is to improve electric mobility charging access in communities across the state. We know that charging where we live, play, and do business is most convenient, and that is reflected in this program. We'll begin the presentation now, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will answer all of the questions at the end of the presentation, and links will be provided as we proceed. The goal of today's webinar is to cover some of the basic eligibility information and to discuss the funding available and how it will be distributed. Fourth and ODOT are working together to provide a high level of technical support both before and during the application process. This is a soft launch of the program to help you understand the basics of how to prepare. Details are evolving, and the best way to stay informed is to check the website, sign up for the newsletter, and join our upcoming webinar dates. The next one will be on June 7th, and in that session, we'll actually go over the application that we have so that you guys will all be prepped and ready for June 13th. So, more helpful information is on the way, including a step by step guide of the application process as well, which will be listed on our Community Charging Rebate Program website in the coming week. As we near the launch date on June 13th of 2023, these sessions will become more detailed and help walk you through the process. Before we dive in deeper, if there is anyone that cannot stay for the entire session, that's okay. We have a recording of the May 10th session, which is currently available on the program website, and we'll eventually get this session on the website as well. Electric vehicles are crucial to lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. With the increased demand for electric vehicles, charging infrastructure is essential. ODOT would like to use this rebate program to help benefit projects that are located in priority communities. This program is intended to fill the gaps in charging infrastructure throughout the state. Targeting priority communities is a key element of this program. The goal is to give these communities a head start for the next EV wave. EV drivers are often parked for longer periods of time while they are charging. The program looks to place stations within multifamily housing complexes, business areas, and shopping districts, predominantly in places where people can stay to eat, explore, and shop for a while. This program will work with level 1 and level 2 charging. As you can see on the left-hand side, level 1 charging will require a 120 volt outlet. You can find these outlets in most homes. This outlet is what is commonly used to charge your home appliances like a microwave or a laptop. And on the right-hand side, you will see a level 2 charging station or charging port, excuse me. Level 2 charging requires a 240 volt outlet. This outlet may look less familiar, but are commonly found in homes where high powered appliances are used. You can usually find this outlet powering items like your drying machine. The program aims to help reduce the cost for applicants and place EV chargers in strategic locations. Rebates equate to $4,250 to $5,500 per port, or up to 75% of the eligible cost, whichever is less. Applicants can apply in two ways, either as a pre installation or post installation project. We will go over the rebates and the application flow in more detail in the following slides. The program will launch on June 13th at 9 a.m. So keep that time and date in mind. And the program closes by mid October or once the funds are fully reserved, whichever comes first. We have extended the date from mid August to mid October, so keep that in mind as well. On this slide, we have added a pie chart to help visualize. The funds will be separated into two buckets. There is a total of $1,750,000 available for the first round. 30% or $525,000 will be available for non-priority communities, and 70% or $1,225,000 for priority communities. The rebates will be reserved on a first come, first served basis in each category. Please note that a single entity cannot claim more than $150,000 in rebates per round. I will leave this slide up for a bit longer. Perfect. Okay, here is an image of the priority type locator map that applicants can use now. If you have a specific location in mind, you can search the address once you open the map, and the map will generate an answer. The answer will state whether the site location is in a priority or non-priority community. If the location is in a priority community, the map will clarify whether the location is disadvantaged, rural, or both disadvantaged and rural. If you want to search a general area, you can click on the map on the website and zoom into your location. The legend or key will be on the right-hand side so you can view which locations are rural, disadvantaged, or non-priority. Every location in the state of Oregon is categorized as either a priority or non-priority community. This tool will only differentiate which bucket of money the rebates will pull from. ODOT is using the statewide equity map to determine if areas are deemed as high or medium high disparity, and the Oregon Office of Rural Health's urban, rural, and frontier areas map to determine if areas are considered urban or rural. Keep in mind this information will be requested during the application process. Here's the rebate breakdown in greater detail for eligible projects. Beginning with the first row, Level 2 chargers that are considered publicly accessible will receive $4,250 per port or up to 75% of eligible project costs. Multifamily housing Level 2 chargers will receive $5,500 per port or up to 75% of the eligible costs, whichever is less. Multifamily housing applicants can also receive a $750 rebate for the installation of a Level 1 charging port. We recommend installing a Level 1 charging port in conjunction with a Level 2 charging port since Level 1 charging can take longer. Also note, applicants must install a minimum of 2 ports and there is a maximum of 8 ports per site location that can claim a rebate. Rebates are based on either a maximum dollar amount per port as listed in the chart or a percentage of the eligible cost, whichever is less. To apply for the program, eligible applicants must be a business, nonprofit organization, state, local entity, or tribal government entity. Businesses and nonprofits must be licensed to do business in Oregon with a valid Oregon business license. They must also be the site owner or authorized agent with a site verification form. The form will be requested from each applicant during the application process. We also offer some examples of ideal sites, including shopping centers, recreational areas, parks, restaurants, public libraries, schools, and there are many more. If you would like to see a more extensive list of the ideal site host location and the site verification form, both are on the Community Charging Rebate Program website now. The goal is to have places for the public to spend time while visiting while their cars are charging. While their cars are charging, excuse me. The two eligible locations are publicly accessible parking sites and multifamily housing. We went over a few examples of ideal publicly accessible parking sites. Additional examples include tourist locations, retail stores, transit stations, and more. And for multifamily housing, some examples include apartment buildings, townhouses, condos, and more. Here's a list of eligible costs to begin considering. Charging equipment, installation, labor and material costs, engineering design costs, electric service upgrades, project signage, site lighting, ADA compliance, network agreement costs, and maintenance contracts. I want to touch on some aspects of the ADA compliance. Once 5 or more stations are installed, it is strongly encouraged to offer one van accessible EV charging spot. As listed in the guidelines, the program requires compliance with access board recommendations. I will leave this slide up a bit longer so you can take a picture or note down the eligible costs. Okay. There are two ways to apply for the rebate. The first is with the pre-installation method, and the second is the post-installation method. We'll begin with the pre-installation application flow. To qualify for an incentive, applicants may apply prior to the project's installation and reserve funding. Here is the pre-installation application flow. Again, we will go into greater detail on the application specifics in the June 7th information session. That way, everyone feels comfortable with the application process. In the June 7th information session, we will be walking applicants through the application. The applicant gathers and submits all of the necessary documentation. There is a list of required documents on our website that you can review now. If there are any errors with the application, ODOT will send it back to the applicant with a note explaining what they need to fix. The applicant will have 10 days to make the necessary corrections and resubmit the application. Once any errors are corrected, ODOT will review the application again and reserve the funding. The applicant then has 270 days to complete installation. Once the post-installation portion of the application is submitted and reviewed, if everything is correct, the application is approved and a payment is dispersed. Now, this is the post-installation application process. To qualify for an incentive, applicants may apply for the rebate within 90 days of installation, as long as the installation was completed after the program effective date on June 13th of 2023. The guidelines define the term installation date as the date on which the charging station is affixed to its permanent location, connected to the electrical source, and ready for use. Again, the application goes through the review process. If there is an error, the applicant will receive a notification to fix the error. Once the applicant resubmits and everything is correct, the project is approved for payment. There are lots of resources on the Community Charging Rebate Program website for applicants to read through, including the FAQ, Site Verification Form, Required Documents Checklist, EV Charging 101, and the Transportation Electrification website. We recently added the priority type locator map, the list of qualified chargers, the guidelines in draft form. Remember, ODOT reserves the right to make changes to the guidelines before the program launch date, and a detailed list of eligibility requirements. We'll be posting a PDF of the application on the website as well as a step-by-step guide for the application process. Now, Stu will begin his presentation explaining his experience.
Okay, super. Thank you all. So I'm going to recap just briefly here a kind of multi-year journey that we had at the City of Ashland and Ashland Municipal Electric Utility to upgrade our level 2 charging. So all of these projects are located in one parking lot, which is in downtown Ashland, which Ashland's about 20,000 people, right southern border of Oregon on I-5. Pretty tourist-heavy economy here. And so we had written, before I worked at the city and the utility there, somebody had written a grant to bring in 2 of these Blink chargers. So here's a picture of one. You can see not an electric vehicle parked here, but this is one of the only pictures we had of the older chargers. So this is actually, I think, 3 different phases of evolution here, and we learned a little bit each time. Let's see if I can. There was a lot of demand for public chargers. This is actually the second phase of charging. You can see in front of these cars here, there are a couple of different black chargers up against that fence line, and the ADA space on the right side completely blocked in by this Tesla, which was a shared EV and non-EV space. So here's where these 2 chargers were. This is actually 4 chargers, 2 banks of 2 each, and just a different view. So this is what came after the Blink chargers. And again, sorry I didn't have a lot of photos from back in this day, but on the left you can see we used essentially what was a non-networked but very durable charger. And after this phase of the project, we went up to basically did some imagining of what do we want to put in next. And so here's a photo of this same parking lot, but just the opposite side, where we're sort of mocking up what future chargers might look like. And so, and I'll recap all of this in just a minute, but this was part of our sort of imagining and working with stakeholders to see what we were going to do. And that culminated then in actually putting in these chargers, what had started as 2 pretty shoddy Blink chargers that had been very abused, and we ended up with 10 of these juice box chargers, which were a much easier and friendlier to use operation. Just another view here of the same area. Now, I should say that the project goals we had when we were looking at this, really we inherited what were these 2 chargers. Only one was really functional. And the backing for all of this was our climate plan and the utilities plan to electrify. Essentially, we wanted to maximize plug utilization. I wanted to see these chargers full of cars, and we knew that by putting them out there, there would be a lot of benefits, both to reduce greenhouse gases, but also to improve air quality locally. And the other piece of it was that the Ashland Electric has a variety of other electrification programs, such as an electric vehicle incentive. And so we were seeing these as sort of a paired program. We're going to offer an incentive for the vehicle, but also we're going to put out public charging. And all of this was made possible really because of the utilities' involvement in Oregon's Clean Fuel Program. Were it to be funded from the general fund, it probably wouldn't have happened, and certainly not at the scale that we were hoping for. So, once we came up with the sort of political and financial wherewithal to do this phase 3, I think things really started to take off. At this point, I have to do a double check. I think City of Ashland has about 16 or 18 publicly accessible chargers, and then probably another dozen or so for the fleet. And so with this is also, I should say, just one piece of the electrification that we did there. There was a whole fleet side that happened as well, which was very similar to this. Just for the sake of observation, this is what a service panel might look like for about 5 level 2 chargers. So you'll need to have space for this in the ground as well. We ended up having, because I was trying to maximize utilization and lower barriers, for us as a municipal utility, what made the most sense was to just give charging away for free. We are able to collect through the Clean Fuels program for every kilowatt hour that goes through the system, and it roughly covers the cost of the electricity. So for us, one way of lowering barriers was to remove the whole payment side of things. You don't need a credit card, you don't need a cell phone, you don't need a network, you don't need a membership. All you have to do is drive up with your EV and plug in. And that was really important to me as a tourist community, but also as a community that wanted to empower people who didn't have charging in their own homes to be able to just roll in anytime and charge. Let's see. Also, I think economic development. Oh, hi, Jenna. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that's really great information. Thanks for providing that on the Clean Fuels program. That's awesome. That's one
Sure.
of the
Yeah.
requirements for this program as well.
Um, so one thing that we talked about, was payment. When you collect payment, then of course it's nice to have cost recovery, and it's essential in the long run to have that. But in some cases, it might make sense to skip that. Uh, there's also a question of liability. Putting chargers out in the public sphere, they will get abused. Um, they will get treated roughly, possibly vandalized. Even well-meaning users may do the wrong thing. So we tried to solve liability here by just putting a disclaimer on the box itself, which has maybe limited mileage, but was at least something we could do. But also provides a way for people to look for assistance. So if you have a problem with the charging, how can you report that? And it's really nice to have a way for the end user to connect back up the system. And essentially just trying to tell people how to use the plugs. I think most folks who drive EVs already know this, but I was surprised in interacting with people that they didn't really know that the button on the J1772 actually shuts off the current, and that there's some education that can happen. So we wanted to just make a connection there. Let's see. Okay, so some other things to consider in addition to just the cost of chargers and the cost of digging. There's parking blocks, there's striping of the asphalt, there's asphalt repair, uh, landscaping, signage, wayfinding. There's a lot of different things in addition to just finding the right charger. I would say that there is a place, I think, for level 1 and level 2 and level 3. But level 2 really seems to hit the sweet spot for what we were looking for as far as cost and dwell time meeting our criteria. Let's see. Okay. So ADA charging. This is super important. We were lucky enough that one of our original sites actually was built right on an ADA spot. But we were able to kind of expand that and move it out a little bit more. It still falls short in a couple of different ways, but it was the best we could do with the site at the time. But I just wanted to put a placeholder in here that this is something you should design into your project from the very beginning if you can, because it's a lot harder to retrofit it in if you have to later. Oh, and also, this EV here has a motorcycle on the back of it, which I thought was super cool. So PlugShare, I think, can be your friend if you're looking for what EV drivers in your community are actually doing right now today. It's helpful to get on there and look and see what other assets are in your area, how they're functioning. People will leave reviews, and it's really a nice way to get unsolicited feedback from people. So this was someone I found today. Actually, hadn't looked at PlugShare in a long time, but this person says, "I love this free charging while we visit Ashland." And there's a bunch of other nice comments on there. And you can bet that when something is broken, they will tell you that too. How are we doing on time, Jenna?
We're doing well. You have plenty of time, as much time as you want to take up. I think at around 12:45 we'll definitely be saving room for questions.
Okay. Yeah, I bet we can transition to questions before that even. So shade, is desirable for your drivers and also for your chargers. Not always easy to get. The one thing I would say about this, if you're putting chargers in near trees, is that there will be roots. And so you have to be cognizant that you don't want to kill the tree while you install the charger. So this was a balancing act. I think everywhere you have trees. Oh, and then, another thing, this is that exact same location, actually, is that utilization during the day and utilization at night can be quite different. Typically, in a public setting, I would see this more busy during the day because people are out shopping and whatnot. But it's not to say that there isn't anybody charging at night. I think nowadays, this particular charging spot is actually busy 24 hours a day. Um, but there are times when utilization is at zero, and that's okay. That's normal. And the other thing is that you really want to have good lighting. This picture doesn't do it justice, but I think our spot is actually more well lighted than most, but you can see that it still falls very far short of what would be ideal as far as the personal safety and comfort. I think that is my last slide. So I have more I could say and speak to, but maybe we could shift over to questions.
Yeah, of course. I have a few questions for you. So, on average, how much did each charging station cost?
Yeah, so I think around 5 grand per port for 40 amp charger. I should say that our projects were spread out over quite a bit of time, and we
Mhm.
did in little chunks, and so there's not sort of a singular accounting of everything. Also, I used utility staff for some of the routine stuff. It was not necessarily tracked by time, but I think $5,000 per plug is a pretty average amount. But a lot of it will really depend on how much infrastructure you need to put in the ground. The more you need to dig and the more asphalt you need to replace, the more expensive it will be.
Perfect. And then how long did the installation process take from start to finish, and did you experience any unexpected challenges?
Yeah, I think about a year per upgrade is pretty typical. Just to string it all together, for the two upgrades that I managed, we did an RFP. The first was for just for equipment, and then we did the install. And the second project was a turnkey installation, just because we didn't have the staff at the time to deal with it. And I think about a year and a half is pretty average. We could have done it faster, but we had some seasonal constraints, and it was not urgent at the time.
And what permits did you acquire beforehand?
Oh, permits. Yeah, so standard electrical permit. We had to put in a couple of new electric services for the second upgrade, and we also had to do permitting to close the parking lot for a few weeks. But it was pretty light as far as what I had to deal with as a utility employee. I don't think that a customer would have had to do a whole lot more than that, though.
Okay, perfect. And what was the process like to get a quote?
Oh, well, writing RFPs as local government is always arduous. I honestly don't recommend it if you can buy something off contract, but it's really personal taste, I think. Um, RFPs are nice because you can control all aspects of the project, but then you have to control all aspects of the project. So I think, and Jenna, maybe you know, but if DAS has these on procurement now through state contracts or not, um, if so, that would be an easy way to go.
Okay, yeah, I'm not too sure. I'll have to look into that. And I was going to ask who installed the station and what resources did you use to get in contact with the installer?
Yeah. So our turnkey installation, honestly, I don't remember who the vendor was. It's been a few years, and
That's
since I
okay.
don't have my city records anymore, I don't know. Um, they were in the Willamette Valley, I believe, and we could find out, and I'm sure that that is public record. Uh, I'm sorry, what was the other question? Oh, and then the first part of our installation was actually our utility staff who did the install. So
Okay,
it was a little
perfect.
different. Um, One thing I would say, just to backtrack about permitting
Hmm.
a little bit, it is not permitting specifically, but stakeholder involvement. We had a lot of different stakeholders on this project because of, like, say, Parks and Recs, for example, manages the shrubberies that are next to the chargers. So if we dig in the dirt, we have to involve that part of the city. And so, there was a lot of not so much of permit getting, but of checking in with all the various parties who touch that piece of dirt and make sure that we're all on board about managing the striping of the asphalt and digging of the trenches and the hooking up of the chargers. And at the end of the project, there's probably 50 different people involved. So
Hmm. Perfect. And looking back on it now, what would you have done differently to make the process easier or quicker?
mhm. um, gosh, I don't know. I probably would have simplified my RFP a bit.
Hmm.
I probably would have leaned on our procurement staff more to help with that. At the time, it was sort of a niche project that we had no dedicated funding for. Um, so I kind of carved it out in my spare time. Uh, in retrospect, knowing how the perceived need was real and seeing the results of that uh, public charging, sort of take off, I think I would have gone bigger sooner, and I would have put in more for future proofing. That adds significantly to the cost of making the site ready, but not always. And knowing, especially in this case, that we have a public parking lot that we're going to, if we continue down the road of electrification, we're going to put more chargers there eventually. That we could have done more to put conduit in the ground, and I think if anybody is developing a large site and you'll need charging down the road, absolutely putting in extra transformer capacity, conduit, and so on is really valuable.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Are there any long-term costs or benefits to be aware of? This is my last question as well.
Um, I think the benefits are kind of not sufficiently enumerated, honestly. We know that there's an economic development benefit, but we can't quantify it exactly. I think that that would be something worth studying more.
Mhm.
Um, there's no doubt that all the businesses who are co-located near these chargers get some extra traffic because of that. And so I think that would be worth being able to speak to more, I think.
Mhm.
Um, Other benefits, I think Southern Oregon has been plagued with smoke from various fires over the years. And that has interestingly helped drive the push for EVs because it's like any little thing we can do to clean up air quality is worth it. And so that's also been kind of an interesting interplay to see that. And additionally, just that EV drivers tend to um, really like this resource, and they really appreciate, I think, that it's easy to access and it's uh, uptime is pretty good, really, considering it's not maintained by anybody in particular. And I think that having it be uh, better than people would expect helps kind of exceed the expectations a little bit.
Mhm.
If that makes
Perfect. Well,
sense.
thank you so much for that, Stu.
Good.
Feel free to stick around if you want to help us answer questions, or you can jump off now. Totally up to you. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. I'll stick around for a few.
Okay, perfect. Alexandra, do you want to kick us off with some of the questions?
Yes, definitely. Thank you again, Stu, for those nuggets of wisdom and sharing your experience. I think that's really helpful. And thank you, Jenna, for the great overview of the program. We had quite a few questions come into the chat, so I'll start with those. And if anyone else has questions, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them. So I'm just making sure I don't miss any. So give me 1 second. Okay, the first question we received was, do you have to be rural and disadvantaged to get a rebate? No, you have to be one or the other. So for priority communities, they will be either rural or disadvantaged, or there's going to be non-priority communities who are also eligible for the rebate. So it's one or the other, not both. Although sometimes if you enter an address into the priority map locator tool, it will give you both. And you'll get to select which one you would like to put on the application. And there's no benefit to selecting either one. It just helps you helps the application pull from the right amount of funding.
Mhm. Yep.
Then we have a follow-up question. How are disadvantaged advantaged areas determined? Our location is directly outside of a disadvantaged area. So for this, ODOT was using the statewide equity map to determine if areas were deemed as high or medium high disparity. And then they used the Oregon Office of Rural Health to determine urban, rural, and frontier areas to map if areas were urban or rural. So, to reiterate, even if your location is right outside of a disadvantaged area, you are still eligible to apply. It will just pull from a different pool of funding, the 30%.
Mhm.
Another question. What is the definition of a site location? If we have multiple parking lots, for example, one for guests, one for staff, and one for buses, do all of those count as different locations? That's a really great question. So, for eligible locations, a project site must be in Oregon and they must either meet all the requirements for a publicly accessible site or for a multifamily housing site. And for a project site, it's defined as a single physical address. So for large campuses with multiple facilities, those are considered a single project under the program, even if they do have multiple addresses. And for this rebate, also keep in mind that fleet vehicles or parking for fleet vehicles is not eligible under this rebate, and it has to be publicly accessible if you're opting for the publicly accessible parking site. So I hope that clarifies your question, Elena. Okay, we have a question about clean fuels. Is Clean Fuel Oregon available to everybody? So, under this rebate program, all recipients are required to enroll charging stations under the DEQ's Clean Fuels program. And this will enable applicants to obtain the different financial benefits by generating clean fuel credits, by distributing electricity through EV charging, and then monetizing them through CFP. And I would also like to pass this off to Stu and see if you have anything you'd like to add as our policy expert.
I would only add that at the time I signed up for the Clean Fuels program several years ago for the city, it was not very onerous. Basically, it's just record keeping for charging, and if you're an enrolled party, then you can tap into that system. And I have not kept current with exactly what is required to join up now, but it's pretty doable, I think, especially if you operate multiple chargers. Say you're already in the weeds and keeping track.
Mhm.
That's great.
Kind of a related question. I am presuming the remaining costs are not covered by the grant. At least 75% could be covered by the or clean fuels credit that a utility might have access to. So you're correct, Jennifer, that under this program, applicants will receive 75% of the total eligible costs. So ODOT is really encouraging applicants to pursue additional incentives, such as from your utility or other incentives that might be available to offset the costs. Great questions, everyone. Please keep adding them to the chat. We have a question from Ian that I will pass off to our ODOT representative. Will there be a round of funding or rebates for level 3 chargers?
Yeah, so there isn't for this current round. However, between each round that we do, we can alter the program slightly. So it may be something we revisit in the future, but not for this current round.
Thank you, Jenna. Okay, we had a question about payment. Jenna, did I hear you say that no payment is a requirement of this program? As an example, if a condo complex would like to install level 2 chargers on the site and then charge back the unit owners for their usage, is this allowed? So, if payment is required and under this program, you may charge users for charging. There's different requirements that you will need to be able to meet, and those are identified in the program guidelines. And that includes visibly and clearly defining the pricing unit, what kind of payment is accepted. So listing all of the forms, including credit cards or a toll-free number. So different guidelines like that that you would need to meet, but you would be able to charge users for a fee. Anything
And
else you'd like to add?
yeah, sure. All of that information will be requested in the application too. So if you're going to choose to go that route, make sure you have that information written down so that you can provide it in the application really easily.
Another excellent question. This one's from Chris. Is there a list of contractors that install EV chargers available? Fourth and ODOT do not have a comprehensive list of contractors that we can point you to, but we do have some resources available that we'd be happy to share with you just to get the process started. So, Chris, I can follow up with you through an email and send that over to you. Okay, great questions. If we're interested in forming a network of EV charging businesses along the coast, that was a statement, sorry, we are interested. We would like to have access to others with similar businesses who have also EV chargers. Anyone interested or can get on a list of call participants. Wow, that's a really great idea. We currently don't have anything like this happening, but we'd love to support you in getting connected with other businesses to get this network on the coast. I know the coast really needs this. Um, so I think other participants on the call, feel free to maybe respond to Emily, or feel free to reach out to Fourth and we can help facilitate getting you in contact with one another. A question from Scott. Does publicly accessible need to be accessible 24/7? No, it does not. Under this rebate, publicly accessible means 9 hours a day for 7 days a week. And that is clearly listed in the program guidelines, so you will be able to see that there. Lots of great questions. I'm running out of breath, so keep it up. A question from Elena. Can you please repeat the ADA requirements? Sorry, that moved. That you mentioned before. Did you say that it should be one van accessible spot per 5 charging stations?
Yeah,
Jenna,
I can go
would you
back
like
and
to
look
take this
for
one?
that. Let's see. Doo-doo-doo. Oops, this might take me a moment. If you want to answer the next question, I can get that information.
Okay, sure, no problem. Thank you, Jenna. We have a question from Chad. Any plans to offer e-bike charging rebates in the future? Thinking at parks. I'm going to echo what Jenna said earlier about the level 3 chargers. So currently not for this rebate and not at this time, but there might be opportunities in the future.
Perfect. And I found an answer for the last question. So I said I wanted to touch on some aspects of the ADA compliance. Once 5 or more stations are installed, it is strongly encouraged to offer one van accessible EV charging spot. As listed in the guidelines, the program requires compliance with the Access Board recommendations, and those Access Board recommendations are listed. There's a link provided in our guidelines that you can click on and review.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenna. And Emily shared their email address. So if you are on the coast and you would like to work together with other coastal businesses to set up a network, please reach out to Emily. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'll give it a minute or so. But as you're potentially typing up your final questions, I'll just say thank you so much for joining us. Um, we are going to have our applicant support session on June 7th, so I encourage you to sign up for that. And also, as I end this webinar today, you will be prompted to a survey. We highly encourage you and ask you to please fill that out. That feedback really helps us improve these information sessions for future rounds. So you'll see that right after. It shouldn't take you more than a minute or two. Looks like we had a quick follow-up question. To follow up on your answer to my first question, does a fleet vehicle mean a vehicle that is owned by our own organization, or can it be buses coming from different school districts, etc.? Jenna, would you like to take this one on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we don't explicitly define fleet vehicles in our guidelines, but I would love to take this question off the chat and we can talk about this over online and I can discuss this with you in greater detail so we can provide you with the best definition.
Excellent. And one more question. Can one institution submit applications for two different site addresses? Yes, you may, but please keep in mind that you're capped at the 150,000 per funding cycle.
Yeah, and that's $150,000 in rebate funding claimed or approved.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
And okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions. If you have anything that you think of later today or a week from now, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is listed on this last slide right here, also on our websites as well. I will send up a follow-up email to everybody with all the resources that are available. If you miss the beginning of this session, it will be recorded and posted on the fourth website. One more question. Is there a fee to apply? No, there's not a fee to apply. That's a great question. So please, on June 13th at 9 a.m., have your application materials ready. And if you need any support, feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to go ahead and exit our meeting, and it will prompt you to that survey I was talking about. Thank you again to everyone for attending, and thank you to Jenna and Stu for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.